So this is Karl. Karl is like, I always considered him like the wolf in Pulp Fiction. When I would call early and I'd have a problem and they'd be like, all right, we got Karl on it. It's like, oh man, you got Karl on it. That's all you got to say. I'm good. I'll shut up now. So this is Karl Anderson. He's going to talk about the things that are coming out in the exciting new KAZOO 4.0.
Well, thank you, Ron. All right. Let's see if the HDMI is going to cooperate. Well, we got 1 out of 2. There we go. All right. Okay, excellent. Well, thank you very much, guys, and welcome to KAZOOcon. And today I'm going to talk about what we've been building, because we've been a little quiet, and I'm assuming that a lot of you are here to see what it is that we've been doing. So every year, it is my great privilege to come up here and share a tremendous amount of work that's done by an amazing team. And this year is no exception, yet another record breaker across all of our projects. We've done almost 7 million new lines of code and removed 3 million. So a significant amount of work has gone into preparing the product, getting solutions to you guys, and that's just within the engineering team. There's a tremendous amount of work done by everyone at 2600 Hertz. So today, I'm going to go over and introduce to you guys the new Monster applications, the Monster enhancements that we've made, new KAZOO features, KAZOO enhancements, the 2600 Hertz products that we've been working on, pool party, packaging, and exactly what's next. So let's talk about the new Monster applications. So probably the one that has been the most requested, which is finally coming out, is the call center. So we've been trying to build this one for a long time. In the KAZOO core, there's an application called AC/DC, which was the first go at that. But we do believe that we've cracked it. We've got a solution that we feel will scale and will solve your problems, has the proper extensibility, so that we can build off of this as a foundation. And if you're interested in that, in the main track today, we'll have an entire talk diving into that. So I'm not going to go too much into that. We've also built an operator console. This is something that's been requested quite a lot. So this would allow you to see the current status of the system, what calls are going on within an account, and then interact with them so that you can perform transfers or put calls on hold, things like that. And of course, this is excellent for going into offices, kind of replacing the Flash operator console or anything else that they might already have. And it's a Monster application, so it runs in the browser, and it's not something you have to install and keep updated or anything else like that. And we have an entire talk going over the web phone, which will be using the operator console as part of its demo. So if that sounds intriguing to you, then check out that in the engineering track. We've also built a conference manager. So this allows you to come in and see all the conferences that are configured within a system. And it shows you both the conferences that are there, lets you access and configure them. You can set up administration pins, so you can have a moderator and a participant join the conference. And you can set call-in numbers. So this basically is a complete conferencing service as its own application. And it goes one step further than that. I'm sure you've all been in, had conferences where you're waiting for somebody to call in or something like that, and you're just sitting on the phone. So you can actually come into here and see in real time who's in the conference, who's talking, execute commands such as mute, kick, things like that, so that you can open this up and wait for them to join or do whatever you need to do. If someone's talking too loudly or just background noise, of course, you can mute them. So that gives you a really nice service offering there. Currently, this is targeted towards the admins, but it gives it the capability to start building out from there. Again, a nice foundational tool. And so that will be discussed in further detail in the business track tomorrow. We've also got an application called the Voicemail Manager. So this application came out of a result of a lot of support tickets and things that we got, as well as some modifications to the core that I'll talk about a little bit later. But we regularly get support tickets for people who have voicemail to email on, and they have never gone in and deleted their voicemail box. So they have, 250 messages, and they don't want to hit delete, 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 right? And so our support staff does that for them, basically, right now. So here's a tool where they can come in and take a look at the voicemails that are in the account and manage them. And I'd like to demonstrate that to you guys here. So this is the actual live voicemail manager here. And if I come over here, I can show my Brio phone. And hopefully you can see that, but this teeny little icon right here just shows that there's no voicemails on this box. So while I continue this demonstration, I'm going to call in because I have many devices, and so it's going to take a moment to ring through. But I can come over here, and I can say, for instance, grab all of my listen messages and simply move them to a deleted folder. And there's the Brio phone. Kick that one off. Like I say, it's still going to ring because it's ringing my other devices. But there we go. So that should be my voicemail. Oh, sorry. One more. There you go. One more. There it is. So I'm just going to skip that. Hello from KAZOOcon, testing the voicemail manager. So I'm going to hang up. And internet willing, there we go. We've got an indication that we've got a voicemail, and I can refresh this, and it should show me that I've got my voicemail here. And I can come over here, and I can play that message back, like we've had the capability of doing. Right? And in doing so, that has transitioned, as you can see here, that voicemail from new to listened. And if I go back, it's also cleaned off the indicator. But I can also go back the other way, so I could take a couple of these, for instance, move them to new. And as soon as that update takes place, you can see the indicator came back on, and it shows I now have 2 voicemails. So it's all in real time, and you can come in and manage any box that's in the system. Another one that's been commonly requested that the modifications to the back end have allowed us to do is I can grab this voicemail, and I can move this one, for instance, to the sales voicemail box. Right? So now I can move and shortly copy voicemails between the mailboxes via the UI and the APIs. And through some sponsored work, we're adding that into the menus for the voicemail boxes themselves on the phones. So that's the voicemail manager. And I'm happy to announce that this is an open source application that we will be releasing after KAZOOcon, or during KAZOOcon. There we are. All right, so the next one is in the same vein, is a fax box manager. Yay, faxing! So this one lets you see the faxes that have been received into a fax box, that have been sent from a fax box, as well as the SMTP, the email errors that might have occurred. So I'd, once again, like to demo this one as well. So if I come over and I switch to the Fax Manager, one of the things that's been an issue with the SMTP, the email to fax, that I've talked about before at KAZOOcon is that you don't have any insight into why certain emails fail to send faxes. And so in the email to fax logs, the administrators for the account could identify that here's a failure, take a look at the details, and it'll describe to them exactly why it failed. In this case, error, no attachment. So they have some insight now into why things aren't working, which avoids opening a support ticket, which also means that you're answering your customers' questions early and keeping them happy, which is very important. So I'm going to come over here now to my email, and I'm going to go ahead and send an email here that should start a fax. And to validate that that's going to happen, I'm just going to watch this real quick. Now, one of the things that you're able to do in the Fax Manager, of course, is download the PDFs, both that have been sent and received. And the sent's important because when you send us things like PDFs or other formats, they have to be converted. And if you send it in a strange format, we've seen some old iPhone Apple tablets that give us TIFF files in very strange formats that don't properly convert. And so by being able to download the actual result that we sent, you're able to see exactly how that conversion took place. And it looks like the demo gods aren't smiling on me right now. Maybe we'll give it a minute more, but we'll come back over here to the Fax Manager and I can show you exactly what that looks like. So you can see both my received fax and my sent faxes listed here. So the other thing that you can do as well is if you send a fax that had some private information on it, that you could come in here and remove them from the system permanently. That's not a soft delete. And so that allows you to come in and kind of clean up things that if you sent your credit card over a fax or something like a document to a lawyer you didn't want anyone else to ever have access to, you could remove it from the system entirely. And we'll be going over some other interesting things that you can do with the fax attachments. So this one as well is an open source application that will be released at the end of KAZOOcon. And we have some other apps that we're working on that are almost pre-alpha. So you may or may not be aware of it, but we have something called dial plans. We've had them in the system for a little while. They let you at the account, user, and device level manipulate the dialed number prior to being normalized, typically into E164 format. And this is very useful if you're going international, to be able to support various country codes and things like that, and very specific dialing rules that are within that country, but not have to go in and try and make the entire system understand those rules, because that's very difficult to do. And so this is a UI and interface to go in and set those parameters and test them. And that's one of the things that you'll see quite commonly within our applications. We don't try to just give you the tools to configure the system, but also ensure that what you're doing will behave the way that you expect to avoid issues before they happen. And we've got another one called CSV Jobs, and I'll go over the back-end component of this. But CSV Jobs are a way to queue up a task on the system by inputting a CSV full of phone numbers and perhaps account IDs in another column, and asking the system to run through all those phone numbers, assign them to account, or do some other bulk operation, release them, things like that. So using this tool, you simply create your CSV, you upload it, it'll ask you which column is what. It tries to make a good guess, but you have to map the columns. So there's no set format that everyone has to learn. You just make a CSV with whatever format you'd like, and the system will ask you the question. And then it'll give you an output, yet another CSV that tells you all the numbers and any errors in a row, so that you can address any partial uploads or partial operations that didn't complete. And this is a very extensible framework. While at the moment it's only processing phone numbers, it does have the capability of doing things like, for instance, crawling all your sub-accounts, giving you a CSV that has all the billable quantities on them, things like that. Maybe parsing your CDRs and giving you usage reports, right? So we're open to whatever ideas, whatever kind of reports that you'd like to build out of the system. We want to start extending these capabilities in this tool. And so that's it for the new Monster applications that we've built. Let's briefly talk about some of the Monster enhancements that we've made. So one of the biggest one, and if you are interested in this and the engineering track, they'll be going over all the nitty-gritty details here. But you might have noticed that the Monster UI repository on GitHub no longer has just the source files. It actually has something called gulp and sass present in it. So what those two tools are actually doing is they're condensing and appending all the source files and CSS files together so that there are much fewer things to load in the UI. And this makes it extremely snappy. As I was switching between the apps, you might have noticed that they were instantly loaded and then had to issue API requests. So this makes for a very nice user experience. And SAS itself also gives us the ability to start to clean up some of our CSS sheets in ways that let you go in and modify simple templates and maybe change the branding colors, the highlight colors, some other skinnable items there. So that if you were to build your own monster, and in the future perhaps even through a white label application, you can start skinning Monster UI. Kind of a minor one, but one that I like to point out because it didn't look very nice prior. But we haven't added any new features to the user portal. However, we have cleaned it up and brought it into the same kind of look and feel as the rest of the application. And that's kind of the first phase of starting to integrate some additional features into it. Because prior to that, it was just a direct copy from the KAZOO UI. And getting back to kind of that concept of self-service, and this is kind of much more of a power user than anything else, because there's a lot of gobbledygook on the screen there, I'm sure, for some of you. But one of the things that we've added is the ability within the Debug app to see the real-time presence packets that have been sent to the phone. So if you've opened a ticket with us in the past about a light or something that wasn't working with regards to presence, we've had to collect a lot of information because it's very difficult to debug presence. So this would let us go in and grab the information we need directly, almost instantaneously. So that gives us a much faster resolution. It also gives the engineers the technical information that they need to make sure that that never happens again, whatever it was that might have caused that particular problem. We've also, I'm not sure, how many of you guys know that there's hotkeys in Monster UI? Show of hands. Oh, man. So one of the things you might have noticed is when I was switching around between the applications, that I actually wasn't using the mouse. So for instance, if I wanted to switch to Smart PBX, I can do so right from my keyboard. And so there's a number of shortcuts and hotkeys, and applications can add them as well, that let you jump around very easily. So as administrators, I highly recommend that you might check that out, because it makes navigating the UI very quick and very efficient. But one of the things that they added, which has become my favorite, is within an application, if you simply hit D, you will get debug account information, which gives you the account ID, the auth token, we'll talk about that in just a bit, the app URI Monster Core version that's currently running. So if you guys are on support staff or working in the application or doing any kind of development work, you'll know how important the auth token and the account ID is. And if you have support staff and you say, hey, what account was that problem? Hit D, give me that big thing there. It's very convenient. So that's Monster. Let's talk about KAZOO. So one of the biggest features, the new features in KAZOO, is the KAZOO Data Manager. So the KAZOO Data Manager is a ground-up rewrite of the KAZOO Couch Manager. When we initially wrote KAZOO, we only intended to use a single big couch cluster, actually originally a single couch DB cluster. And that worked really well for us. It's given us a lot of scalability. We're very happy with that decision, but we're ready now to expand on that and start growing out new features. And in doing so, we needed to refactor that core module. So it's now called KAZOO Data Manager. And it allows you to connect the system to multiple big couch clusters. So, for instance, you could have a big couch cluster that runs certain customers and another big couch cluster for other customers. Or you could have a big couch cluster for just your voicemail files and one for all of your configuration. Right? The more common one that we expect people will take advantage of this is, if you're not aware, we have databases we call the month-only database, which is everything that's generated within a month, so like CDRs, voicemails, things of that nature. And those grow and need to be managed and monitored, but the account databases themselves that contain the configuration, those are really stable because not much changes there. So if you move all of your month-only databases off to another cluster, then you ease your maintenance load considerably. But we went even further than that, and the reason it's called the Data Manager is because it doesn't just consider Big Couch any longer. One of the big improvements here is going to be talked about by Luis here, and it's called storage plans. But this lets you wire in Google Drive or Amazon S3 as an attachment storage engine, which gives you a tremendous amount of power. And one of the things I mentioned when I talked about deleting the faxes off the system using Fax Manager, right? Maybe they were never there in the first place. Maybe they were in your Google Drive or something else. So if you're looking for PCI compliance or some other type of environment where maybe you can't put it in a hosted system, now you have some options. But it also gives you the ability to integrate all kinds of interesting tools or build your own interfaces to get that data out. And we removed eyebrows. So while the new eyebrows is probably fine, we've been burned by the old eyebrows too much. So in doing so, we gained some performance improvements and, of course, stability. So that's super exciting. And if you guys have been watching CouchDB, 2.0 is released. So here we go. And they also maintain backwards compatibility of the data files, so that's awesome. We introduced a new application called KAZOO Tasks. So that is primarily responsible for running the CSV jobs that I demonstrated, or we had the UI component of a little bit earlier. But one of the other ones that's powering is we had a bunch of crawlers and various applications that perform different jobs, such as the number agent, the low balance top-ups, the soft deletes, things like that. Those have all been consolidated to make them more efficient into the KAZOO Tasks application. So you'll want to make sure that if you're running your own staging environment or deployed it yourself, that you indeed start KAZOO Tasks, or some strange things such as soft deletes won't clean up and your database size would grow. It also is the necessary endpoint for the API for the CSV jobs. So if you're using that API, make sure you have KAZOO Tasks running in the environment as well. And I mentioned I'd get back to it. So when I demonstrated the hotkeys on Monster UI, I showed using D and that giant thing that looks very strange as an auth token is actually something called a JSON Web Token, a JWT. So this is super exciting. This is going to open up all kinds of doors for you guys. So what this is using a cryptographically secure way of actually authenticating with KAZOO. So if you're familiar, before we would send a UUID, which is 32 characters, we stored it in the database, and we just simply used that to validate that you were authentic when you made requests. And that database would grow because, of course, there's a lot of API requests flowing through the system. We no longer need to do that. We have no need to store this information anymore because it's all based on a cryptography secure key, and any system can check that the key and the signatures still match and validate that it is authentic. But it gets even more impressive than that, because this means that other systems as well can both generate and consume these keys. So when it comes to being able to integrate both having KAZOO as the authority for authentication, or a single sign-on platform, or some other system where they are the authority and they're passing information, they're called claims in this mechanism, then you can actually do that today. And when you decode that big long string, what you actually end up with is a JSON object that's signed. So you can pass information back and forth between systems using that. So this opens up a tremendous ability to do all kinds of very interesting integrations. And it also dovetails quite nicely into a lot of work that we've been doing for OAuth. And if you're familiar with that, that's another excellent way to do integrations and a requirement for doing some of the things like the Google Drive. So you might notice a trend here with terms of integrations. So let's talk about some of the KAZOO enhancements. So one of the biggest ones that we've done is we rewrote Number Manager. So Number Manager had what sounded like a great idea at the time, but turned out to be a significant and fundamental flaw, which was that every number assigned to an account was stored on a single document. And when you're running PBX systems, fax services, things like that, you know, 250 numbers, something like that, no problem. It has no issue with that. If you're running a trunking platform like our trunk store, well, some of those guys have hundreds of thousands of numbers on a single account. And right around 2,000 numbers, putting them all on one document would start slowing the APIs down on the order of seconds, and it only got worse from there. So in order to correct that, we needed to remove the use of that document, and we've done so. So the new Number Manager, we've tested it. It scales extremely. I mean, we haven't hit the actual cap yet on our sandbox, so we don't know where that number is, but we've way surpassed anything that was there before. So now this opens up a tremendous, removes a tremendous blocker to rolling out some of the larger clients. And while we were at it, of course, since we're there and fixing things, you might be familiar with the number lifecycle document that I produced eons and eons ago, and it has concepts in there for number pools and sub-number pools and reseller number pools. So we've corrected, so we've finalized all of those. So that means that now, for instance, if you have customers using Bring Your Own Carrier, they can actually import their phone numbers into number pools, and then their customers can directly pull from those numbers. And if you tie that all the way back around to the CSV jobs, now we have a pretty powerful number management system that scales very efficiently that actually lets your customers self-manage as well. So it meets some of the missing business models that KAZOO wasn't able to efficiently handle before. And I've been talking about it for a couple of years, and I'm going to keep going on it. But I really want to get lib phone number in there as an alternative, or an optional alternative to the current regex expressions that are used to normalize all the phone numbers. What this does for you guys is gives you huge international capabilities without knowing anything about the actual area that you're going into, because it's all coded up in lib phone number. So that would allow you to expand. And we've also added new carrier modules. So bandwidth.com has a new API. We've got a new module to use that. We've got Telenexus, and we've got VoIP innovations in there now. So we're starting to build out some of these so that you can directly connect to the carriers, have them provision and activate services and phone numbers. And if you're interested in how that looks and how you can use that, and some of the work that we've done around porting to make that a lot more, a lot easier experience, as well as starting to automate that, then check out the business track tomorrow. And we've done a lot of performance improvements. So we've moved some of the work that used to be done in eCall Manager off to Camilio, which actually helped speed up our call setup time. We separated out some ETS tables into cache, which helped improve overall performance of the entire system. And we've removed an event that we've had in the system for a long time for historical reasons called channel execute. And I just want to make mention of that, because if any of you have coded applications, you should be aware of that. You can turn it back on if you're using it. But KAZOO was only using it for two things. And for everything, every command we sent to FreeSwitch, we would receive a channel execute and then a channel execute complete, telling us I'm about to do it and I've done it. So you can imagine, by removing the I'm about to do it, how much less traffic is on the message bus, and therefore increasing the overall performance. And we've also changed some of the routing bindings to make them more granular, so that applications that got messages before that they really just threw away no longer even have them delivered, again reducing some of that overall transport on the message bus. And one of the biggest improvements for the call setup times is we switched to using a lot more of a FreeSwitch command called multivar, or multiset, excuse me. And what this did is, prior to this, when a call came in, we would have to set a couple parameters on that call, and we would do one by one, which if you're doing a number of them and you're averaging somewhere 20 milliseconds, 50 milliseconds, it kind of depends on the network because you're communicating to remote servers, right? That adds up to 250 milliseconds of call setup time, whereas now we do it in one big go. So that dramatically improved call setup time. The biggest change in what the users will experience is in the voicemail messages. So the voicemail messages are currently stored in the account configuration, and I made mention a little bit earlier about what we call the month-only databases. And we've moved the voicemails from the account config to the month-only databases. Okay? This stabilizes the account configs so that they rarely change, and all their caching and indexing no longer has to be regularly updated. And the MODBs are now actually storing all of the data that's generated that month, whereas this was the exception. The impact that this has on your customers, however, is that we don't necessarily want to open 4 years worth of month-only databases in order to figure out how many voicemails are in a voicemail box. So there is a configurable retention period that defaults to 3 months, which means your customers on the phone have access to 3 months worth of voicemails. However, using the voicemail manager, they have access to every voicemail that's ever been left for them. So they do still have access to it, but the phone will only indicate and give them access via the menu to the last 3 months. So do prepare for that. The other thing is, of course, if we're going to move them, we're going to address some other scaling issues here. So when we originally created voicemail boxes, we have an array that has the metadata, who called you, and that kind of thing about every message on your voicemail box. You know, I figured myself, I never get past, 30 messages or something I haven't listened to before I go and delete them all without listening. But we have customers, again, like I said before, who have never actually signed in because they get them all as emails. And so that starts to get into thousands of voicemails in some case, which is another one of those, coming back to those phone number documents that slowed down. When they got to thousands of numbers, the voicemail boxes could do the same. So we moved all that metadata now into the actual audio file that's stored in the MODB, which means that we can now move and copy them and archive them very easily, and they carry their metadata with them. So the only note here is we had to do a bunch of backflips on V1 API in order to keep that backwards compatible, and we'd like for you guys to just double check and ensure that there's no inconsistencies there if you've got some kind of integration with the voicemail message system. So another big one on the core that is actually an enhancement, but could technically be a feature, is we've changed up how call recording works. So currently, call recording requires you to inject a start call, stop call recording command into the call flow. So you have to kind of beforehand know that's what you want to do, and if you want to remove it, you're rewriting call flows. So now we've got flags that are at the account, user, and device level that let you both record inbound, which we've had, and outbound. So now you can set up, thank you, you can set up call recording so that you can go turn it on, toggle it on and off as you need, and the system will just do it without modifying call flows. We also added support for multiple call recording. Since it's now so easy to turn on, you'll probably have it on all over the place. So if you have, if you turn it on one user and they transfer it to another, you'll get 2 call recording files. And because we now follow transfers, the first would be, you could also record the entire call as well. And then we added some URL parameters. We noted that a lot of you that are running call recording, when you get the call recording, the first thing you do is query the KAZOO APIs and find out what the call was. So we included some data now when we send the call recording on the URL parameter there. Another big one for the integrators out there, and also impacting your users, but probably making their lives easier, is, I don't know if you've ever gotten the support call, why are there so many of these random CDR things in my list? And you have to explain, well, they're actual channels, a call is comprised of multiple, I think we've all had that conversation before. So we've added the idea of an interaction ID, which allows you to group them into call detail records. I know it's surprising, but this means you can build a list of all the calls that happen on the system, then drill down into the channels. So there's APIs that do that. And it's smart about trying to figure out what caller IDs to use. It actually looks at all the channels and tries to represent what actually happened with the call, rather than just giving you the first leg of the call. So it's a slightly different view of the same data. We also changed forgot password. That link does a kind of a strange behavior just because it was quick and easy. If you click it on anything prior to 4.0, it resets the password and sends a new one to the user, which less than ideal, but we now modified that system so the link, it'll send the link to the user clicks the link, then the password reset is actually executed. But that means that if you've modified any of the templates, you'll probably have to go in and modify the verbiage on those templates, because you'd be instructing them to do something that's no longer valid. So just be aware of that. And on that routing, so this is when you call between accounts in KAZOO. We've done a tremendous amount of work for the developers in the crowd. It's based around the loopback fixes. But this, prior to this, if you call between accounts, you would end up with CDRs in only one of the accounts, the caller. You now get all a proper representation in both of them, so 2 legs in one, 2 legs in the other, and a simple one. There was also some bugs in that. If you called in certain scenarios and attempted to do a transfer, it would actually be referencing the account of the caller, not the callee. So the callee would be transferring based on the call flows of the account that called them, and music on hold would be incorrect. So we've resolved all of those. And if you fax between accounts, we had to drop T.38 support. We no longer need to do that. So if you've got some people faxing, I don't know why they would, between your accounts, then it'll actually work a little bit better. We also changed where we resolve contact strings. So traditionally, we stored these in a component called eCall Manager Registrar. We had instructed FreeSwitch to route directly to the endpoint through Camilio, but now we ask Camilio to call the end user. FreeSwitch to call the end user. Camilio figures out where they are on the internet and sends the call to them. This lets us store additional parameters, which makes WebRTC and TLS work much smoother. Also supports some of the funky endpoints out there that send up all kinds of different parameters that we were otherwise dropping. And it also improves the call setup time, just because it's less work that has to be done by the eCall managers, which tend to be the busier components of the system, generally speaking. And we also refactored Blackhole. If you're not familiar with this application, this is the application that provides WebSockets events coming out of KAZOO. And you'll see that being used quite extensively here through the applications throughout this conference. But we did refactor it to make it much more efficient. So we removed some points of duplication in there. When you're binding for events, it does very clever things to make sure that it's not pulling them from the message bus more than once if multiple people are listening. We did remove Socket.io support. Turns out there was no good libraries in Erlang to continue that. And the only reason we had Socket.io's protocol support in there in the first place was that the clients would make it easier to code up, but shipping JSON payloads around is just as easy. At least we think so. So if you were using the old Blackhole, the 4.0 will require you to update just so that you consume just JSON payloads out of there. And through its new extensibility, it paves the way for two-way communication. So, for instance, one of the things that's our target is to start moving the crossbar REST APIs into WebSockets, to start giving you capabilities to not just to build out some really real-time systems that could be very interesting user experiences. So that's all of Monster and KAZOO. Let's talk about 2600 Hertz. So we've got a new Cluster Manager 2.0. And if you want to learn more about this, it'll be in the main track, but it is a tremendous update to Cluster Manager. And I know it sounds silly, but we can now actually install KAZOO with Cluster Manager. So prior to this, it could only perform upgrades. And the reason for that is installing KAZOO requires you to go in and make modifications to a number of configuration files, some of which aren't even KAZOO, IP tables, SSHD, all those kinds of things. And understanding how to do that and do that within a cluster and know how to wire everything up is a very complicated task. And so it took a lot of work to get it correct, and we have achieved it, and you'll be able to see that. And of course, as 4.0 progressed, we now support CentOS 6 and 7. We build Debian packages. We're not quite there yet with that one. But of course, Cluster Manager had to be updated to support those environments as well. Those OS. And then we also added support for multiple environments. So you guys could all have your own staging environment, for instance. So that makes it nice and easy for you guys to know that when you go into Cluster Manager using the new UI components called Version Manager, and push that update button on your production, you'll know exactly what you'll get because you were running it on staging and have already run through and tested, right? Right. In Mobile 2.0, so here we go again. This one has been a tremendous amount of work, both engineering-wise and just through the politics of the thing. But when we first, I think you've probably heard this story before, when we first went to launch the mobile platform, we got blocked by SMS, MMS, and we also only had 3G networks out at the time. So we didn't have any data throttling. And that was a huge risk to the company. It turns out when LTE rolled out, everybody was able to download gigs and gigs of data, and you could wake up in the morning and completely have a bill that would swamp the company. So we've added data throttling, and you can now create data plans that will actually monitor the data usage of the individual devices, slow them down, and eventually cut them off if you so desire. The other big issue that kept blocking people is they didn't understand that the mobile system is actually its own service. It's not actually part of KAZOO. And so you'd have to set it up there, then go to KAZOO if you're using that as your PBX, for instance, and reset up a device there. So we've actually done a tighter integration there to make onboarding mobile devices a lot easier for you guys. And if you're interested in that, tomorrow, the first 2 talks on the business track will go over that. And support. So we do get a lot of support requests, even though KAZOO is perfect, clearly. But we've been working a lot on building a tool that helps us get answers to you, the correct answers to you guys, very quickly, so that you have a quick turnaround with your customer and you can address any issues that they might have. So this is both for the agents ourselves, starting to automate our support tasks, things that we commonly do when you file tickets, such as pull logs, things like that. This tool can do. This tool can take us into your UI, because trying to figure out where all your various deployments are, what their server names are, can sometimes be a bit of a trouble. This tool will eventually be expanded so that when you file a ticket, you'll be granting us authorization to actually access your system. You'll be notified exactly what we're doing. And it also lets you file tickets through it, prioritize them. So you could tell us, I am filing a ticket, I'm filing 2 tickets, but this customer, he's my biggest, I want you guys to address this ticket first, please. So it's no longer kind of what order they came in and what resources we had. You guys are actually helping us help you. And we'll be going over that. I'm afraid the slide is actually incorrect on the bottom. That's the second day. Check the schedule there. It's called Goblin. This internal tool is called Goblin. And within the provisioner, we've added 2 new models. So we've added grand streams and OB highs. So we're expanding device support there, as we will continue doing. And we've introduced the new security model that I've talked about before, where the phones will get an initial provisioning file that's just the MAC address at the root directory of the provisioner. They'll then be instructed into a deeper nested directory that ensures that nobody else knows what that kind of secret directory is. And then that initial file will no longer be available. And so this is a universal way of securely providing provisioning files to the devices. And rather interestingly, out of a simple feature request that came from you guys, is additional customization support and the ability to have kind of a provisioner within a provisioner. So this gives you all kinds of really interesting capabilities, even within just some simple XML files. So if you want to learn more about that, check us out. Check out the engineering track on day 2. We also have an internal module. It's called Konami Pro that we're offering. So this is a ground-up rewrite of Konami. Konami will remain in the community and we'll support it as best we can. But this particular module is going to be one that 2600Hz offers, and it is slightly more performant. But more importantly, this module, the reason it was a ground-up rewrite is the Konami module as it's currently architected and without the capability to actually kind of backwards compatibly change it. This module lets you go in and trigger the same events but via an API or something else without having metaflows or processes already established for a call. And so this lets you, for instance, start on-demand call recording either through in-call feature codes or via the API itself. And it also has some minor additional capabilities, like I say, call recording at the moment. We also have another module that we wrote. And this one kind of just came out of needing a new Metaflow processor, again, that wasn't backwards compatible. So this is called the eCall Manager extensions to support Konami Pro. But it also has a component in there that is an alternative transport for the 3 most critical messages in the system. That's the channel create, answer, and destroy. And what this does for you guys, if you're plugging into WebSockets or webhooks, on the current version, you'll notice you'll get 2 or however many eCall managers are connected in a zone for every event, because they all transmit these events and they all go out the webhook. So using eCall Manager extensions, this alternative transport allows us to deduplicate the events, making the development easier and removing some of the messages from the message bus as well, so further improving some of the scalability there. So let's talk real quick about Pool Party. This was probably one of the funnest projects that I've had a chance to work on this year. So what is Pool Party? Well, in concept, it's a pool of inexpensive resources that party together to create redundant telephony services. It started many years ago when the Raspberry Pi first hit the market, and we said, boy, wouldn't it be great if you could run a VoIP platform on Raspberry Pis? And then it expanded to, wouldn't it be wonderful if you could run a VoIP company on Raspberry Pis? Turns out, probably not. But they don't scale, they don't have the necessary efficiency to get there. But some boards do. And so this year, we started looking at this again in earnest. And we discovered the boards that you'll see in the back there. They are actually incredibly powerful, and at the price point, you can't beat them. So if we've got a bunch of boards, now how do we get them into a data center, right? That we started looking around and found nothing but expensive solutions or no solution at all. So turns out, like Patrick alluded to, for Christmas I was given a 3D printer. And every problem I've come across in my apartment since then, I have a solution in the 3D printer that I can fix it with. So the first variant of Project Pool Party looked like this. This was just kind of an initial test to see if it even worked. You can see there's 2 power supplies on this one, and the boards are mounted slightly different. It's a much simpler design. But it actually worked, and we put it in the data center. It didn't catch fire, didn't overheat. So we were pretty happy with that. And so we took it a step further, and we learned something like cable management is actually important. And it's nice if you're able to pull it out on a drawer, because otherwise you can't change the servers when you put them all in a rack. So what you see behind you is kind of the next iteration of Project Pool Party. And it is actually installed in data centers and up and running. And we are continuing to build out our racks with these servers, which is giving us a new and improved service offering for you guys. And I want to briefly go over packaging. When we package 4.0, there's a significant number of changes both to how they're packaged and what packages are available. So if you're looking for why don't I see any of this stuff in the repo, it's because it's actually been over here at packages.2600hertz.com. It's been open forever, but you guys can go take a look at it right now. You'll find currently 2 folders, artifacts and the experimentals for the OSs, but here at KAZOOcon we'll be moving the 4.0 into staging. And if you're interested in how you actually perform an upgrade, I'll be doing a talk at the end of the engineering track today, going over the specifics of the packages and how they changed and how to upgrade. And I also hinted at this last year that we were going to move to Erlang releases, and we did. So what this does is this packages everything KAZOO needs to run entirely into KAZOO. So that means that there's no dependencies on the system. Doesn't matter if there's Erlang installed at all. You get a binary, you install it, you say start, and it starts. So it's much more akin to the applications you're used to. But most importantly for us, it decouples us from having to maintain Erlang on your systems, which means that now we can test and validate and ensure that the next version of Erlang is proper and correct and ship it out, bundled with KAZOO, so that there is no need to say, oh, you can't update to 4.0 until you update to Erlang 19, and Erlang 19 isn't on CentOS 6, so we're going to wait for that OS to install it, right? So this gives us a lot more control of being able to keep that system up to date. And so briefly, because I'm running out of time, clearly, but what's next? Well, the App Exchange is something we've been talking about forever. We really want to have a place for you guys to put apps into the App Store and put them into Monster and actually participate in some of the things that we're doing here. So we're really focused on trying to get that out there. You know, the call queues that we've built lead to a call-centered application that leads to a contact center that really gets you guys in the door with some of these guys that already have these solutions that you can't currently replace. And so we're building that tool set out and that offering out. SMS, MMS, and mobile. We've had a technical ability to do this for a long time, and we're really working hard to make that actually a reality for you guys. And with Monster UI reaching the maturity level that it is, we're going to sunset KAZOO UI. So we're not going to like go delete the repo or anything, but we're not going to support it any longer. And turnkey billing, turns out you can't make money at it unless you bill your customers. So we should probably help you with that. So one of the big focuses is giving you guys invoicing, billing tools, not just so that we can bill you, but you can bill your customers. Documentation, we say that every year, but this, we have such a big push going through the office right now, and if you notice in the KAZOO repo itself, we have a record number of documents there. The APIs are hugely documented. We have automatic tools to build them up, and then we come behind and add context to the output of those automatic tools. So it's, thank you. So there's a huge, yeah, right? And it's not just the engineering documentation. We're actually building out documentation across the board, end-user documentation, how to use Monster, everything, all the way through to business things. And with the JWTs and the OAuth work that I hinted at, right, integrations. So there's all kinds of interesting programs and software solutions and services out there that if you tie KAZOO into could provide very interesting offerings that nobody else or would be very difficult to do otherwise. An application called KAZOO Tabulator we're working on. So this is to start building out statistics and tell you things like calls per second or some simple things like that, or fraud detection. I'm seeing a lot of calls to high rate numbers, things like CDR processing. Also, like for instance, with the contact center and call queues, there's all kinds of interesting statistics there. Hang up alerts is one that we attempted but never really had the right mechanisms to build out that kind of time series data set. So Tabulator is the one that will be doing that. And audio and SIP self-service debug. So we've had an application in there called Call Inspector for a long time. That's a SIP self-service debug tool. But it's really not super useful unless you can also debug audio because, how many times do you actually get an issue where you need the SIP packets? It's pretty rare. But how many times do you get an issue where you need to know why the audio was bad, right? So we're working on debug tools there that let you go in. When the customer calls up, while they're on the phone with you, you say, oh, I see the problem. Here's what you do to fix it, right? Tremendous support improvement. We've wanted to move Trunk Store into Camilio for a long time because of Camilio's incredible processing power when it comes to SIP messaging. And with a trunking platform in Camilio, you'd be able to go out there and take over the world. So we're working on that. Expanded video support, you'll see that in some of the demos here, hint, hint. And automated test tools, just ensuring that we maintain code quality, that you guys have confidence when you push that button, that you will get a working system, and that the things that used to work continue to work the way that you expect them. And so that's my talk. Thank you very, very much, guys, and enjoy KAZOOcon.
All right, now it's time. We're going to take a little break, so 10 minutes. So get the old coffee out and the new coffee in, and we will see you back here at 11:10.